In the 1990s, wrestling fans were treated to the Monday Night Wars between the WWF and WCW. World Championship Wrestling was the brainchild of TV mogul Ted Turner. Under Turner, the company gave us some memorable moments and were the talk of the wrestling world for a short amount of time. The meteoric rise of WCW, thanks to Eric Bischoff and the NWO, is nothing short of amazing. However, the downfall, which came at the hands of corporate conglomerates, has been a hotly debated topic for what has now been 23 years since the company's closure. The producers of Dark Side of the Ring and Dwayne Johnson, Dany Garcia, and Brian Gerwitz pieced together a documentary about the death of WCW on the Vice TV network. The documentary brought the company back to the center of the conversation once again. Love or hate WCW, its peak is undeniable. For a wrestling company to be gone for 23 years and still create so much buzz is simply remarkable. Overall, the documentary was a fine watch, but there are more than its fair share of criticisms about it. Nevertheless, since the topic is brought back to the forefront of everyone's attention, let's examine the death of WCW further. We'll look at just how WCW killed WCW. The first thing I have to point out about this documentary is the involvement of The Rock. I don't know about you, and if you enjoyed The Rock's involvement and got some great insight from his words, then I'm happy. I'm over the moon for you. For me, I thought The Rock being interviewed for a documentary about the downfall of WCW was just unnecessary. I know The Rock is making headlines and having memes drawn about him left and right for his outright lies in the WrestleMania 40 documentary produced by WWE, and I'll have more on that when Jimmy and I touch on it on Elite Heat, so check that out. The Rock, who had no ties with WCW whatsoever, being interviewed for this show is like me being interviewed for a documentary about Tom Brady. I get it, The Rock produced it, and he's The Rock. Either way, I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, just by looking at some of the feedback the death of WCW has received. Overall, this documentary feels like a bunch of 60-plus-year-old men playing the blame game and lying to inflate their own egos. The only thing missing was Hulk Hogan lying about how he didn't use his creative control card to screw Sting at Starrcade 97. Don't worry, Eric Bischoff covered that for us, brother. Now, speaking of Bischoff, he was the star of the show, easily the most charismatic and best storyteller of the bunch. Conan, he was great too, and Kevin Nash was pretty funny. Like, bro, I'm watching Kevin Nash and he's just like, it's wrestling, it's a work, bro. Why is everyone so worked up about this stuff? I made my millions and got out of there. My favorite part of the entire documentary, though, is when they cut to The Rock 38 minutes into an episode and he's just like, hey, yeah, I watched Nitro in the hotel room after Raw. Don't get me wrong, there were some good parts of the show. The first episode, even though we've all heard the story about the rise of the NWO a million times, was still told very well. And the episode about Vince Russo was hilarious as expected. Russo feels like the biggest whiner and complainer of everyone involved. It's clear why a lot of people would point to Russo's idiotic booking style and self-absorbed attitude as the main culprit behind the death of WCW. However, that just isn't true from what I believe. I love how in the first episode, Bischoff is basically like, I invented live TV. Give rich people who achieved crazy heights of fame 30 years ago a platform to brag about themselves, and this is exactly what you'll get. Which brings us back to Russo. I can't believe he made himself a focal point of WCW Nitro. He booked himself to get attacked by Goldberg, cut promos, even win the WCW title. Ridiculous, bro. Then he wonders why WCW sent him home and then made Bischoff his boss. I'd say give this documentary a look just for the sheer entertainment of it all. Let's talk about just how WCW killed WCW. Eric Bischoff put it simply. There were people at Turner Broadcasting Network who wanted WCW dead the instant Ted Turner bought Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988. That's just the bottom line and the cold hard truth of the situation. No matter what horrible ideas WCW put on television, like the finger poke of doom and David Arquette winning the world title, Turner Brass did not want WCW to succeed. They were still making a ton of money, even with those horrible booking ideas and Bischoff's blank checks to wrestlers like Bret Hart, who he did nothing with. Now, to be fair, in 2000, the company was not making that much money and they were actually hemorrhaging money left and right, but I digress. Once the AOL merger went through, the company was cooked. Ted Turner lost his power and could not stop the top executives from selling the company's assets. The craziest part about this is the conspiracy theory of Vince McMahon having a mole, which helped him orchestrate his purchase of WCW. Enter Stu Snyder. He is a longtime television executive. Snyder worked for Turner prior to his hiring by WWE in 2000 and was let go in November 2001. That was roughly 7 months after WWE purchased WCW. Convenient. Stu Snyder was buddies with Brad Siegel, who was very powerful within the Turner Broadcasting Network at the time. Basically, Stu calls up Brad and is like, hey, can we purchase WCW from you guys? We know you don't want it anyway. This is a very shady tactic in the business world, and if anyone had really cared, but of course they didn't since it's wrestling, then the deal with WWE would have probably fallen through. Now, on the other side, Eric Bischoff, he gathers some funding and is getting ready to purchase WCW for an offer as high as $48 million, depending on what you believe on the internet. Nevertheless, Bischoff had a substantially larger deal on the table for WCW than McMahon did, which was only $2 million. Jerry Jarrett, father of Jeff Jarrett, even had a deal on the table for about $20 million. Now, why did WCW not sell to Bischoff and Fusion Media, or even Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett, you may ask? Actually, they did. Well, they had a handshake agreement of some sort in place with Fusion Media. The agreement did go far enough to the point of an actual press conference taking place to announce the upcoming purchase. Graphics and other promotional material were made too. Essentially, this deal fell apart after Snyder was like, bro, just cancel WCW's TV slot on your network so Vince can purchase it. Brad Siegel cancels the TV slot for WCW, and as they say, the rest is history. Bischoff's deal falls apart, which would have given him control over all things WCW. Talent, likeness, their media library, etc. Instead, WWE buys just the branding and library of WCW for $2 million, which is why guys like Goldberg, Sting, and Hogan sat around collecting checks until their contracts were over. Turner would have rather paid guys to sit home and do nothing than sell to Fusion Media and continue to broadcast WCW. Or Brad Siegel did his buddy Stu Snyder a favor by selling WCW to WWE for the cheap, and then Vince fired Stu when he didn't need him anymore. Whatever you believe, whether it's one of those two stories or something else, that is indeed how WCW killed WCW. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Have a great day. Peace.